Dillon Mitchell bombshell. Ron Harper Jr. Quotes, New Deal and PG number swap. Plus, full 2026 to 27 roster breakdown. What's going on, Celtics Nation? Welcome back to Celtics Daily Hub. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because today's video is a loaded one. We've got a legal ruling that could blow up one of Boston's draft picks before he ever plays a real NBA game. We've got a heartwarming story about a guy who fought his way from an undrafted free agent to a long-term NBA contract, and then had to give up his own jersey number to a 9-time All-Star. And to close things out, we're doing a full breakdown of this brand new look Celtics roster heading into the 2026 to 27 season. Because honestly, this team looks almost unrecognizable from the one you watched 2 years ago. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. The Dillon Mitchell bombshell. Let's start with the story that's got the entire Celtics fan base on edge right now. Second-round pick Dillon Mitchell might not actually be a Celtic this season. And it's not because of a trade or a contract dispute in the normal sense. It's because of a federal court ruling that nobody saw coming. How we got here. Quick recap for anyone who missed it. The NCAA recently rolled out what's being called the 5-for-5 rule. Basically, college athletes now get 5 years to play 5 seasons. No more burning a year just because you redshirted or transferred schools. Makes sense, right? Except there was one problem. When the rule went into effect on August 1st, it initially excluded the class of 2022, the group of players who had already used up their 4 years and aged out of the system before the new rule could help them. That's where things got messy. A group of those players sued, and a federal judge in Colorado, Charlotte Sweeney, granted a preliminary injunction saying the class of 2022 should get that 5th year too. That ruling opened the door for several recently drafted rookies to potentially walk away from their NBA teams and go back to college for one more season. And Boston's own Dillon Mitchell is right in the middle of it. Why Mitchell specifically? Mitchell was Boston's 40th overall pick in this year's draft out of St. John's. He had a strong summer league showing, averaging around 13 points a game in Las Vegas, and actually reworking his jump shot, to the point where he knocked down more threes in 3 summer league games than he did in his entire final season at St. John's. That's a real signal of development, and it's part of why this situation stings a little more for Celtics fans. This isn't some throwaway second-rounder. The front office genuinely liked what they were building with him. But Mitchell still hasn't signed his NBA contract, and according to insider Adam Zagoria, a return to St. John's is being seriously considered. St. John's reportedly has a roster spot open for him and has already been in contact about it. Now here's where it gets complicated, and I mean legally complicated. The NCAA is appealing Judge Sweeney's ruling. They filed their notice of appeal, and the court has given both sides about a week to argue over whether the ruling should even be paused while the appeal plays out. So, as of right now, nobody, not the Celtics, not Mitchell, not St. John's, actually knows for certain if this door stays open. What happens to Boston's rights? This is the part that I think most fans are confused about, so let's break it down as simply as possible. Normally, when a team drafts an international player who signs overseas instead of coming to the NBA, that's called a draft and stash. The team holds that player's rights indefinitely because the CBA treats a professional contract in another league as a valid reason to wait. Mitchell's situation is different. Going back to college isn't the same as signing a professional contract overseas, so the usual draft and stash protections don't automatically apply here. Instead, under the NBA's collective bargaining agreement, Boston has to actually tender Mitchell a required 1-year contract offer by September 5th to preserve their exclusive negotiating rights. If they do that, and Mitchell turns it down to go back to school, the Celtics can still retain his rights for 1 more year, but only until the following year's draft. After that, if he still hasn't signed, he becomes eligible to be drafted again. this time by any team in the league. So realistically, Boston's front office is probably going to make that tender offer before the deadline no matter what, just to protect themselves. But whether Mitchell accepts it and shows up to camp, or declines it and heads back to Queens to play for Rick Pitino one more year, is completely his call. Why might he actually leave? Here's the financial wrinkle that makes this a real decision and not a no-brainer. If Mitchell signs with Boston now, he's likely looking at a two-way contract worth somewhere around $678,000 this season. Not exactly life-changing money for a guy who might be buried on the depth chart. Compare that to what he could earn through name, image, and likeness deals as a star college player in a market like New York City, where NIL packages for a player of his caliber could reportedly approach 7 figures. And then there's the playing time question. Let's be honest about Boston's roster situation. This team already has Jayson Tatum, Paul George, Sam Hauser, Baylor Shireman, a newly extended Jordan Walsh, Hugo Gonzalez, Ron Harper Jr., and fellow rookie Chris Sinak Jr. all competing for minutes on the wing. That's an incredibly crowded rotation for a 22-year-old rookie trying to find his footing. A lot of his development might end up happening in the G League with the main Celtics anyway, so from a pure basketball rep standpoint, going back to college and being a featured, high-usage player for St. John's might actually be the better move for his long-term career. What would Boston actually lose? Now, if Mitchell does walk, what exactly is the roster losing? Let's talk about who this kid actually is as a prospect, because I think it's easy to write off a 40th pick, but Mitchell's profile is genuinely intriguing. He's 6'8" with real length and athleticism. Defensively, he has the tools to guard multiple perimeter positions, and he can be an impact player finishing at the rim and crashing the offensive glass. The one clear weakness in his game is perimeter shooting. He was only a 19.3% three-point shooter across his 4 years of college ball at Texas, Cincinnati, and St. John's. But that jump shot tweak he made over the summer, the one that helped him blow past his previous three-point totals in just 3 summer league games, suggests there might be real growth there. Put simply, Boston drafted a long, athletic, defense-first wing with untapped shooting upside in the 44th slot. That's the kind of value swing that title-contending front offices dream about finding late in the draft. Losing that, even temporarily, is a real disappointment for a front office that's been trying to rebuild organizational depth on a budget. For now, everybody is stuck waiting. The Celtics can't finalize their 15th roster spot. Mitchell can't fully commit to either path. And St. John's is sitting there with a scholarship ready to go, depending on how a federal appeals process shakes out. We'll keep tracking this story closely because September 5th is going to be a real deadline day for Boston's front office. So make sure you're subscribed for the update the second we get real clarity. Ron Harper Jr., a new contract, and giving up his number for PG. Let's shift gears to a story that's a lot more feel-good, because Ron Harper Jr. deserves every bit of this moment. If you followed his path, you know it hasn't been easy. Harper went undrafted back in 2022 out of Rutgers. He bounced around the league on two-way deals with Toronto and Detroit before finding his way back to Boston. Last season, he began on an Exhibit 10 training camp contract with 0 guarantees, worked his way up to a two-way deal, and eventually got converted to a standard NBA contract in April after tearing it up with the main Celtics in the G League. And then came the moment that really validated everything. With Jayson Tatum out injured, Boston trailing 3-1 in their first-round series against Philadelphia, facing a win-or-go-home Game 7, head coach Joe Mazzulla trusted Harper Jr. with a surprise start. Think about that for a second. A guy who'd started just 3 games all regular season, thrown into the fire in the biggest game of the year. His stint only lasted about 4 minutes, and Boston ultimately lost that game. becoming the first team in franchise history to blow a 3-1 series lead. But Harper Jr. has been open about what that vote of confidence meant to him. In his words, it showed the coaching staff believed in him at the highest level, with everything on the line. The New Deal. Fast forward to this offseason, and Harper Jr. finally got his reward. On June 27th, Boston agreed to re-sign him, and the deal eventually got finalized as a 4-year contract worth roughly $13.7 million, with the first 2 years fully guaranteed. For a guy who spent 3 straight years bouncing on non-guaranteed deals, this is his first real long-term security in the NBA. He's called it a full-circle moment and said it's motivation to keep proving the organization right for believing in him. He was actually out doing community work recently, running drills and taking questions from kids at the Junior Celtics Academy, just weeks removed from signing that deal. It's a nice reminder of the human side of this stuff. Guys who fought through years of uncertainty, getting their moment, and still showing up for the community. The number 13 situation. Now, here's the fun part of the story. Last season, Harper Jr. wore number 13. Then, Boston pulled off the blockbuster trade sending Jaylen Brown to Philadelphia in exchange for 9-time All-Star Paul-George. And it turns out, George has worn number 13 for almost his entire career. That's literally where the PG-13 nickname comes from. So, about an hour after that trade was finalized, Harper Jr. got a phone call. George wanted his number back. According to Harper, they worked it out pretty smoothly, and he'll be switching to number 8 for the upcoming season. He's joked about it publicly, saying he's happy to help Paul George get back to being PG-13. It's a small moment, but it says a lot about how these locker room dynamics work when a superstar walks in the door. Harper Jr. is going to be part of a genuinely crowded wing rotation this season, competing for minutes alongside Jordan Walsh, Hugo Gonzalez, Baylor Shireman, and Sam Hauser. It's a great problem for Boston to have, a deep, athletic group of wings all pushing each other for playing time. 2026-27 Celtics roster breakdown, a completely new-look team. All right, let's zoom out, because both of those stories are really symptoms of a much bigger transformation happening in Boston. This is not the same Celtics team that won a title back in 2024. This roster has been completely reshaped, and if you haven't been paying close attention this offseason, you might not even recognize half the names on this depth chart. Let's go position by position. The Jason Tatum storyline. Everything starts with Tatum. He tore his Achilles during last year's second-round series and missed almost the entire 2025-26 season. He actually came back faster than most people expected, returning in under 10 months, and put up real numbers in his 16 regular season games back, averaging close to 22 points, 10 rebounds, and over 5 assists a night. But his efficiency was understandably inconsistent. His first step wasn't fully back, and he settled for more jumpers than usual because attacking the rim still didn't feel comfortable. This time around, he's getting a full, uninterrupted offseason to actually finish that recovery, and Boston is going to need him to reestablish himself as the team's go-to closer in crunch time. The blockbuster trade. The single biggest story of Boston's offseason, without question, is that Jaylen Brown, a 5-time All-Star, an NBA Finals MVP, coming off arguably the best statistical season of his 10-year career at 28.7 points a night, is no longer a Celtic. He was traded to Philadelphia in exchange for Paul George and a package of 4 draft picks, 2 firsts and 2 seconds. This trade has been picked apart by pretty much every analyst in the league. George turned 36 in May, only played 37 games last season for Philly, and is owed a massive $57.7 million this year, thanks to a 15% trade kicker in his contract. When he's healthy, he's still productive. He averaged 17.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 3.6 assists last season. But health has genuinely been the concern. Trading a top 5 wing in the league who's younger and cheaper for an aging star with recent injury history is a decision that's going to be debated in Boston all season long. Other key additions. Boston didn't stop there. They also brought in veteran center Mitchell Robinson from the Knicks to bolster the front court, and added guard Mike Conley Jr. on a 1-year deal to bring some veteran stability and shooting to the backcourt. On top of that, Boston locked up Neemias Queta on a 4-year, $56 million extension, exercised team options on both Peyton Pritchard and Jordan Walsh, and re-signed Robinson to a 3-year, $47.4 million deal. Projected starting 5 and rotation. Based on everything reported this offseason, the starting lineup is expected to be Derek White at point guard, Baylor Shireman or Paul George on the wing, Jason Tatum at forward, and Mitchell Robinson anchoring the middle. Peyton Pritchard is expected to take another leap running the second unit, coming off a season where he averaged 17 points and over 5 assists a game while shooting nearly 38% from 3. Some analysts are even throwing around comparisons to the kind of jump Jalen Brunson made a few years back. The full 10-man rotation likely includes Pritchard, White, George, Tatum, Robinson, Conley, Shireman, Gonzalez, Hauser, and Queta, with Jordan Walsh available as an extra defensive wing option and Luka Garza providing front court depth off the bench. The big picture. Look, this is not the same championship-caliber roster fans got used to a couple years ago. The names have changed, the age profile is a little unusual with George in his mid-30s, and there are legitimate health question marks after everything Tatum has been through. But let's not overreact either. This is still a team that won 56 games and finished second in the Eastern Conference last year, even with Tatum missing almost the entire season. Boston is not rebuilding. They're retooling around a superstar who's finally getting a real, healthy offseason to prepare. The margin for error got smaller with the Brown trade, no doubt about it. But if Tatum comes back anywhere close to peak form and George can stay on the floor, this team still has enough talent to be a real factor in the East. That's everything for today, Celtics Nation. A wild ride. From the Dillon Mitchell legal drama to Ron Harper Jr. Quotes well-earned new deal, to a full breakdown of what this new-look Celtics roster is going to look like this season. Let me know down in the comments. Do you think Mitchell stays in Boston or heads back to St. John's? And are you buying the Paul George trade or still not over losing Jaylen Brown? If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a Celtics update. We'll see you in the next one. Let's go, Celtics!